The late summer sun hung low over the endless wheat fields of Castilla, its light pouring like liquid gold across the earth. Diego Morales leaned against the rusty door of his battered pickup truck, wiping sweat from his brow with a frayed sleeve. The harvest season had been merciless, and the debts pressing down on him felt heavier than the sacks of grain stacked in his barn. His father's land, once prosperous, had dwindled into a patchwork of cracked soil and failing crops. Water shortages, rising costs, and years of bad weather had left Diego with little more than a stubborn will to survive. He was 28, tall and lean, with calloused hands and eyes that carried more weight than his years. Most nights he slept in the small farmhouse alone, haunted by unpaid bills and the quiet shame of a man unable to provide. That evening, as he drove down the dirt road toward the village, his thoughts were fixed on how he would explain to the bank, again, that he needed more time. Suddenly, the stillness of the countryside was broken by the sharp coughing of a car engine ahead. A sleek black Mercedes was parked awkwardly on the roadside, hood popped open. Standing beside it was a young woman, her long hair catching the light like strands of silk. She wore a white dress far too delicate for the dusty road, and expensive sandals that were already coated in dirt. Her expression was a mixture of frustration and helplessness. Diego slowed, instinct telling him to keep going. City people rarely thanked you for help, and he had no time for arrogance. But as he drew closer, she waved at him desperately. "Por favor, do you know anything about cars?" she called, her voice tinged with panic. Diego pulled over with a sigh, shutting off the engine of his old truck. He walked toward her, boots crunching on gravel. "It's overheating," he muttered after one glance under the hood. "You pushed it too hard in this heat." The woman bit her lip. "I don't know the first thing about engines. I was supposed to be in Madrid hours ago." Diego grabbed a rag from his truck and bent over the engine. His hands moved with practiced ease, tightening clamps and checking the coolant. She watched him intently, her eyes curious. "You're a mechanic?" she asked. He shook his head. "Farmer." Her brows lifted, as though the word surprised her. "A farmer who knows cars. Out here, you fix things yourself, or they stay broken," he replied curtly. A smile tugged at her lips. "I suppose that makes sense." Within minutes, he coaxed the engine back to life. The Mercedes purred smoothly as if nothing had happened. She let out a laugh of relief, clapping her hands. "You saved me. I thought I'd be stuck here all night." Diego closed the hood, wiping grease from his fingers. "You should be more careful. These roads don't forgive mistakes." She tilted her head, studying him. "What's your name?" "Diego." "I'm Isabella." Something in the way she said her name carried weight, but Diego didn't press. She was just another city girl passing through, he told himself. Yet when she hesitated by her car door, biting her lip, he knew she wasn't ready to leave. "There's no signal out here," she admitted. "And I don't know the way back to the highway. Could you, maybe show me?" Diego hesitated. He needed to get home, to prepare for another long day. But something in her voice, something vulnerable, made him nod. "Follow my truck, I'll take you back to the main road." As they drove through the winding countryside, Isabella's Mercedes trailing behind, Diego couldn't shake the image of her delicate hands clutching the steering wheel, her face lit with determination. She didn't belong in these fields, yet somehow, she seemed less out of place than he expected. At the crossroads, she pulled up beside him. "Thank you, Diego. I owe you." "You don't owe me anything," he said simply. But Isabella leaned closer through the window, her perfume lingering in the air. "Maybe I'll see you again." Then she was gone, the Mercedes disappearing into the distance like a dream he wasn't supposed to have. The next morning, Diego returned to his fields, pushing thoughts of Isabella aside. But fate had other plans. By noon, as he loaded crates of vegetables into the back of his truck for the market, another car appeared, sleek, polished, out of place. Isabella stepped out, her dress exchanged for fitted jeans and a linen blouse. She smiled as though they were old friends. "You weren't easy to find," she said, brushing dust from her sleeve. Diego frowned. "Why are you here? I told you, I owe you. And besides, I wanted to see what a real farm looks like." He shook his head, exasperated. This isn't a place for sightseeing. But Isabella followed him stubbornly into the fields, ignoring the mud that clung to her shoes. She asked questions about everything, the soil, the irrigation, the rows of struggling crops. She listened, really listened, as Diego explained his work. "You do all this alone?" she asked softly. For now, her eyes softened. "That sounds lonely. Diego didn't answer. He couldn't explain that the silence of the fields was both his prison and his comfort. As the day faded, Isabella lingered by his truck. "I like it here," she said, almost wistfully. "It feels honest." Diego stared at her, torn between wanting her gone and wanting her to stay. Why would someone like you care about this place? For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, something guarded. But she only smiled. "Maybe I'm not who you think I am." She left him with that thought, driving away once more. Yet her visits became more frequent in the days that followed. Sometimes she brought food, other times books or tools she thought might help. Diego resisted at first, but slowly, he grew used to her presence. She brought laughter back into the farmhouse, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. Still, he knew there was more to her than she let on. The car, the clothes, the way she carried herself, it all hinted at a life far beyond the reach of a struggling farmer. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Diego finally asked, "Who are you really, Isabella?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the edge of her glass. "You'll find out soon enough," she whispered. The next day, he did. A convoy of black SUVs rolled into the village, stirring dust and whispers. Men in suits stepped out, scanning the streets with sharp eyes. At the center of it all was a figure Diego recognized instantly from news reports, a powerful businessman whose name was synonymous with wealth and ruthless influence across Spain. Isabella stepped out of one of the SUVs, her expression caught between guilt and defiance. Diego's heart sank as realization struck him. She wasn't just a city girl with car trouble. She was the daughter of Alejandro Velasco, one of the most feared and respected men in the country. And Diego's life was about to change forever. The sun was fierce that afternoon, stretching its golden fingers across the endless plains of Castilla. Fields of wheat bent in the hot wind, their dry stalks whispering like restless ghosts. Diego Morales stood on the edge of his land, leaning heavily against his shovel. His shirt clung to him, soaked through with sweat. His throat burned for water, but the jug at his feet was already empty. He let out a slow, bitter sigh. Every year was harder than the last. The earth seemed to be fighting him now, stubbornly refusing to yield crops the way it had for his father and grandfather. Where once the Morales farm had been called one of the most fertile in the province, now it was a patchwork of failing soil, stubborn weeds, and bills that never stopped arriving. At 28, Diego carried the weight of an old man. His hands were cracked, his shoulders stooped, and there was a heaviness in his dark eyes that came from years of broken promises to himself, that things would get better, that next season would be different, that hard work would be enough. By late afternoon, his battered pickup truck groaned its way down the gravel road toward the village. He needed to speak with the bank manager again, to beg for more time. Each mile of dry road seemed longer than the last, and Diego's mind churned with dread. That was when he heard it, the sputtering cough of an engine, sharp and unfamiliar against the drone of cicadas. Diego slowed instinctively. Ahead, a black Mercedes stood at an awkward angle, its hood lifted. Steam rose in lazy puffs. Beside it, a young woman waved both arms in the air. She looked so out of place in that landscape that Diego blinked, half convinced he was imagining her. Her white dress fluttered in the dusty breeze, and her long hair caught the sunlight like polished copper. Diego's first instinct was to keep driving. Strangers from the city often treated men like him as if they were invisible, or worse, disposable. But her voice carried to him, full of panic and urgency. "Por favor, please, can you help me?" Diego pulled over with a grunt of resignation. He climbed down, his boots crunching the gravel, and approached the Mercedes. "It overheated," he said after one glance under the hood. "These engines don't like the heat, and you've been pushing it too hard on this road." The woman pressed a hand to her forehead. "I thought it would make it to Madrid. I don't know anything about cars." Diego fetched an oily rag from his truck and got to work. His hands, rough from years of handling soil and broken machinery, moved with quiet confidence. He tightened clamps, checked coolant, adjusted belts. Within minutes, the Mercedes gave a steady hum, the engine purring back to life. The woman let out a sharp laugh of relief. "You saved me. I thought I'd be stuck here forever." Diego closed the hood and wiped the grease from his fingers. "Next time, don't drive a car like this on roads like these." She smiled, studying him with eyes that sparkled like green glass. "What's your name?" "Diego. I'm Isabella." The way she said it, calm, confident, made him pause. Her name seemed to carry more weight than the simple introduction allowed. "You don't owe me anything," he said when she reached for her purse. But she didn't offer money. Instead, she tilted her head and said, "Maybe I'll see you again." And then she was gone, her car disappearing into the horizon in a blur of dust. Diego tried to push her from his mind. But the next day, as he hauled crates of vegetables into the back of his truck, the sound of tires on gravel made him glance up. A sleek car pulled into his yard. Isabella stepped out, this time in jeans and a linen blouse, her smile as bright as the sun. "You weren't easy to find," she said. Diego frowned. "Why are you here? I told you, I owe you. And besides, I wanted to see what a real farm looks like." He sighed. This isn't a tourist attraction. But she followed him anyway, unbothered by the mud that clung to her shoes or the smell of manure drifting on the wind. She asked questions about everything. The soil, the irrigation, the price of grain, the struggle with drought. She listened, really listened, as Diego explained. "You do all this alone?" she asked quietly as they stood at the edge of a field. "For now. That sounds lonely." Diego didn't answer, but the silence between them was different now, charged with something unspoken. She came back the next day, and the next. Sometimes she brought food from the city, sometimes tools she thought might help. Diego resisted at first, but soon he found himself waiting for her car, for her laughter that filled the farmhouse, for the way her presence made the air feel lighter. It frightened him. He had no business feeling this way about someone like her. She didn't belong here, among dry soil and broken tractors. She belonged in glass towers, in places where men like him were invisible. Still, he couldn't stop himself. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, they sat on the porch of his farmhouse. The air smelled of dust and rosemary. Diego finally asked, "Who are you really, Isabella?" Her eyes flickered, guarded. "You'll find out soon enough." The next morning, the quiet village shook with the roar of engines. A convoy of black SUVs rolled down the main street, raising clouds of dust. Men in sharp suits stepped out, scanning everything with cold, assessing eyes. At the center of it all was a man Diego recognized instantly, even though he had only seen him on television or newspapers. Alejandro Velasco, one of Spain's most powerful businessmen. A man whose fortune was built on ruthless deals, whispered threats, and influence that reached from Madrid to Brussels. Diego's stomach clenched. What could someone like that want here, in a village that barely made it onto maps? Then Isabella stepped out of one of the SUVs. Her expression was a storm. Guilt, defiance, longing, and something else Diego couldn't name. The men in suits looked around as if they owned the land already. The villagers whispered in corners, uneasy. Diego felt the ground shift beneath him as realization struck. Isabella wasn't just some lost city girl with car trouble. She was Isabella Velasco, the only daughter of Alejandro Velasco. And Diego, broke farmer, son of no one, had led her into his home, his fields, his heart. The world he had fought so hard to hold together was about to be ripped apart.